We'll have time for more later. Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. Joined today by a gifted melodic pianist, Robert Walter. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks.
You know, I wanted you to talk about how to incorporate mystery into music in the sense that things are very polished these days. Things are almost, there's an exactness to it. And you talked about in your liner notes on one of your recent albums, about that if it's too perfect, then there's no mystery. So how do you put mystery into music?
I guess I think about just leaving some stuff in the moment and raw. So I like when I listen to records that I love, there's little moments that may be a mistake or maybe random. I like little sounds happening. Someone's, bass drum pedal squeaks. All those little artifacts become fascinating, and you feel like you're in the room with people rather than some big intention. I like the idea that your recordings are more documentary style. Rather.
Can you, just for the peeps worldwide, what's a record that stands out where there's a flub that you get off on?
Well, I mean, you listen to something like Live Evil, and the whole concept is sort of that.
Yeah, but that's the whole record.
Yeah. So that's something I love. And just, I mean, any old record, even Aretha Franklin records, which are classics, there's like, sometimes your voice would distort a little bit. There's like some moments of like, not that they're not beautiful recordings, but they're not polished like to the degree that people do now, where everything's Pro Tools to hell and super fine-tuned, and every vocal is perfectly in tune. I feel like you've just lost a little bit of the humanity, which is what's appealing to me usually. How
did you become in touch with that humanity? Because a lot of musicians may really not understand what you're talking. It's like a feeling state.
Yeah, I mean, I just grew up with my father was a drummer in bands, and
what kinds of music? Big bands or?
He played. He was in like a Grateful Dead kind of band, and then
psychedelic jam band.
Yeah, like in the late '60s.
Wow.
And then as time went on in the '70s, he started playing country because you could make money doing it. And then he got really interested in blues and blues records, and that stuff really turned me on. And we used to sit up late at night and listen to blues records and talk about what we got out of that. And it was always like these little moments of humanity, not always mistakes. That's overstated, but letting it be, you know.
What do you feel about? I mean, on when you're in the studio, do you feel like I was just interviewing Larry Beckett, who was Tim Buckley's the poet, and was in the Bohemians, the original band with Buckley when they plugged in. And I just wanted you to, he talked about Buckley was Mr. First Take.
Yes.
What do you think about that? I want you to talk to people about not perseverating. First, why is the first take the best?
I feel like, I mean, it's psychological, really. Once you start doing the next take, you start putting a lot of, there's a lot of weight on your intention. What are we trying to achieve? And you start second guessing yourself and think, oh, this one, actually, it's not necessarily the first take. It's the first take you don't think about.
Dig.
You know? So like, if sometimes it takes people 10 takes to get there. And there is a concept that if you really push through and like do a million of them, at the end you kind of don't care anymore, which can be a beautiful thing too. That's like the late night at Jazz Fest concept, where it's your third gig of the day, it's 4 a.m, and you're just like, I'm just playing now.
That's when I want the record button on.
Yeah, you become
loose.
Yeah, you become like just you're living on fumes, and it's just natural. It's not always the most accurate, so there's a matrix of things you want to do. You know, you don't want to be sloppy, but I feel like that you get into a moment.
How fortunate do you feel that you have had a chance, an opportunity to play with basically the people that are directly connected to the shamans of the shamanistic qualities of jazz, people like Gary Bartz, Andy Bay. I was going to ask you about Andy Bay. How did you wind? Because I mean, these cats are a direct lineage to this music, and how did you wind up connecting with them, and how did it help you grow as a musician?
Well, when we started the Grey Boy All Stars, we were really into those Harlem Bush music records, and
oh man,
so
I Want to Be Where You Are. That was the cover they did on
and partly like the
unbelievable.
It came from the influence of that upon sort of hip hop culture at the time, and there's like a, you know, sort of whatever cultural spiritual thing going on in jazz, and those guys kind of became our heroes. So
can you talk, because they became my heroes, but much less. Why did they become your heroes? I mean, just for the music alone, or is it?
Yeah, we liked
You must have been getting
Celestial Blues so much, and then we started digging into the whole record, and we were just like, this is amazing. I also like Andy's music with the Bay Sisters. That's a great sound, beautiful, unusual vocal mix. But and then Gary from Miles's records too, and we were lucky enough we just called him.
Yeah, exactly.
DJ Greyboy called him and was like, "Hey, will you come do this record with this goofy band from San Diego?" And it totally worked out. So yeah, Gary was on my first record, Spirit of '70, and then Andy Bay was on Carl's record that we did with the Grey Boy All Stars. So.
What was it like to actually? I mean, didn't you get to play live with them? Did you tour with them at all?
No, but I played live with Gary. Has guested with Grey Boy All Stars since.
Bartz has.
Yeah, we did it.
Because he's up in Oakland now.
Yeah, we did a few years ago.
This is unbelievable, man.
And we played at the Blue Note. We did 3 nights. James Carter, Houston Person, and Gary.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, people are calling out for you to play a tune. So you want to play? You got a new album coming out? Is that true?
Yeah.
You want to play something off that? Maybe some kind of throwback to the country that your dad used to listen to.
This is not country, but let's see if I can play this one. This is a little tricky technically. That one.
Robert
More or
Walter
less.
burning right now. That's a fantastic. When you talk about labels and music, have they stratified musical vocabulary to a degree? I mean, were you placed? The Great Boy All Stars were placed in a jam band scene.
So when we first started, there was this thing going on that people called acid jazz, and it was popular in Europe mainly. It was sort of dance records that had jazz solos on them or a jazz influence. It was kind of a wide.
But you're talking about the Charles Earland, the stuff that was made on Prestige and things like that.
Well, that was the original.
Okay, so but there was a rebirth of it.
There's a rebirth of it. So people started making these records usually with like a danceable beat, and there'd be a saxophone solo on it, or there'd be some jazzy chords. We started making fun of and hating that tag because everything was like like all that kind of stuff with it, like with a New Jack Swing beat, and it felt a little corny to us, but that's originally what they called us.
But I mean, people were using machines to replicate it but then they'd overdub solos.
Yeah, usually.
Okay, so it was again lacking some authenticity there, right?
But there was at the same time there was a whole rare groove scene where people were at the same clubs would play a set of old organ records, and it was great, and people danced to those too. So it all kind of worked together, and we had no idea about. We weren't particularly interested in the Grateful Dead. I knew it from my parents, but it wasn't part of our world. And then, for some reason, we started playing some shows that attracted those people, or we never really courted it as a thing, but people started showing up to these shows with tape machines and wanted to tape the gigs, and I guess it was improvisational music.
This is fantastic.
We played long gigs, which they liked, and we 2 sets, same kind of concept.
Two sets.
Yeah.
Was the first set more like just like songs, and the second set would be one long jam, or?
I think that happens kind of subconsciously anyway. It wasn't that was never the design. We just made a bunch of songs.
It was absolutely subconscious.
But
that's the beautiful thing about it.
People start drinking, people get looser, the band gets more relaxed, and the crowd gets more relaxed. So the second set did usually get more exploratory.
Let me ask you a question. How did Great Boy All Stars add musical vocabulary to what was there before in your mind? Where you took the acid jazz, but then you merged it with a scene that you weren't even aware of. What was the new vocabulary?
Well, we were just trying to be, Jack McDuff and Lou Donaldson.
I love it, dude.
Literally just,
and Bird and Charlie Parker.
Yeah, but trying our best, really, just to play like those guys. Like we just worshipped those Blue Note and Prestige records, and along with James Brown and a few other things, Curtis Mayfield. It wasn't just a jazz concept; there was funk music in it too. But we really just hoped in our wildest dreams that we'd someday get there. And then along the way, I think because we all grew up on rock music and some other things, we just started, either from laziness or invention, or maybe there's no difference. we started like stretching the boundaries of it slightly and writing our own tunes that had a little bit of influence from the other things, and that became a thing. And then the crowd was part of it too. Like people would want to dance all night, so we'd extend the tunes. Like now I've become fascinated with the Grateful Dead in my own way and gone back to it because I grew up with it, and sort of that was my parents' music, and I was like, stuff. Like,
they were the hippest cats around, man.
But then I started
hip.
Think about what they did. They were playing R&B and country tunes and things like old rock and roll tunes, and just wanted to keep them going. So you start stretching, and then you find something that's in your subconscious in the music that's not part of the original vocabulary, So.
Can you talk a little? I just want to give a big shout out to the Royal Potato family and Kevin Calabro. I mean, how do you get the 20th Congress out to the people today, and how is Royal Potato helping that? I mean, for instance, just take us through because I mean the industry has just changed so much. Where you used to have record companies promote the bands and put them on tours after they cut those albums, but the listening mediums have changed. We're obviously saturated with material today. Talk about the journey. Talk about how you guys are promoting the music.
I don't think anyone's figured out exactly what it's going to look like now.
Yeah.
So we're like in the middle of
and we're talking about like really smart Pete. I mean, everyone's got good brains on them.
Yeah, it's the.
Why is it so vexing though? Can you talk to and why is the music consumed in Europe and Japan and the Middle America?
Well, luckily or not, I sort of came into my own right on the tail end of that happening. So I've never really benefited from like record company support in a traditional way.
You've never felt that way. So.
Not in the old school way where they like give you a big advance and they give you tour support and stuff. That's never happened for me. And
2 weeks in the studio, you know.
Yeah, my music's always been kind of, it's a small genre it's never been pop music or whatever. So it really didn't affect me. Our income has always been from the gigs. And we put out records basically to get people to come to the gigs. And that's the same thing that's happening now. It's harder to figure out ways to pay for your record. You know, this is the first record I've done like a crowdfunding project on. And it's just because I wanted to spend a little more, you know, you can do it in a day and it's fine, but I kind of wanted to produce a record and takes a little more time in the studio, spend a little more time in post-production, you know, so we're in the middle of that now.
How in your mind, being that you've been on the bandstand for a long time, and how has the significance of music changed in our culture?
Well, the only thing I'm sad about a little bit is that I think it's great that this is the good side, is that everything's available to you and people can really check out something. They get interested in Charles Earland. They can find most of his music. If not on Spotify or iTunes, they can find it on YouTube. Someone's like played the record and you can get into it. And it used to be you had to search forever. And it'd be like amazing when you found that one. Oh, I found Black Drops on vinyl, and you know, but
11-minute track on the B-side that you could play on that the radios would play at one time.
Yeah,
but no, I mean more to the point, the intake of it by the peeps. You know,
I do think at this point, because it's so available, each thing is of less value to you. It happens to me personally. Like if you have 20 records, each one of those records means a lot to you, and you like turn them over and read the liner notes and get all into all the minutia of it. And now you're just like, oh, what else? It's like flipping a million channels. You know, it's each thing becomes less important because it's so highly available, I guess. So there's it goes both ways. I feel like I don't want to be like, crying for the past to come back, though. That's
no.
the thing, and you have to sort of adapt. And there's great things about it too. So
yeah, no, I want you to tell me a couple of the great things about it.
Well, the good thing is now.
Not that I'm saying just as a touring musician who wants to play spiritual music. This is something that you with people you love. You don't want to hate the people you play with. So what do you get off on just from the artistic point of view in today's modern era of melodic improvisation?
Well, I think it's everything's good and bad. The fast sort of news cycle of it, like you can be on tour and people can see the gig the next night, and it's great that that's sort of happening. It started happening with tapers back in the day, and I loved that scene of that. The gig is actually important. The gig,
but you didn't get hit to the tapers until Grey Boy, right? I mean,
yeah.
you didn't go on Dead Tour, did you?
No.
So you rebelled. Your parents were rock. Your dad was playing Dark Stars and things like that, and you were just like, I'm not digging it. But the taper scene you got off on when they started.
When we started touring with Grey Boy and we were improvising every night, it felt cool to me that people were like, that the gig wasn't just a way to promote your album. The gig became the art, and each night, and that's how we looked at it anyway. So
no, what the great Johnny Vidakovich told me, what's your intention as an audience member? They were part of the musical statement. Yeah, and that's dope.
And the event becomes important, and I've played better music on gigs than I've ever done on an album. You know, it's hard to recreate. You'd be lucky if that was the best day. But if you're on tour, one of them's going to be the best day, you know.
I wanted to just ask you, but I noticed that you've a great family, and they're carrying on the lineage of music on the bandstand, but they've kept their hearts open. Is Steve, Jennifer Kimmock, and you played with John Kimmock. I had a chance to interview John, but can you talk about his time feel, and what you like about playing with John?
I've known him since he was a little kid.
So Kimmock got on the Grey Boy. He wound up playing with you guys too. How did you connect?
No, he doesn't play with Grey Boy. He plays with Mike Gordon's band.
When did you first connect with Kimmock? Through Mike?
Steve. So when I was playing with Steve, I played with Steve in a band with Rodney Holmes, Reed Mathis, Steve Kimmock, and me.
What was the name of the band?
Steve Kimmock Band. So
you were living out in the Bay, or?
No. He just called me. We had met each other a few times at gigs or festivals or whatever, and we played together. That was a band for a couple years. Cool touring band, improvisational in different ways. It got me out of sort of all my, soul jazz affectations.
Out of those
out of my rut, and interesting harmony. And Steve's such a patient improviser, like he got me out of my I got to prove how awesome I am. Like he's just got that sort of Zen vibe that was great. And
he went through his own evolution. I'm sure you know about, like, where he was the same way. The attitude was there, and eventually he did find Buddhism, I think, or something along those lines, where just But his patience is key.
Yeah.
But John wasn't on traps at that point. You knew him when he was a kid, though.
So he was just hanging around, and then we'd play sometimes at a private gig, or sometimes he'd sit in, and I just always loved him. And he was always into what I would think of as this sort of left of center instrumental bands that cross over into, they would hate to be called this, but like jam bands or sort of post jazz, like Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey, or
Brian Haas is tuning in.
Yeah.
Reed Mathis. So Mathis must have stretched out that band, though.
Yes. And he always had that sort of exploratory thing going on.
Yeah, he was on fire. He's just, you guys are all you're all like omnivores when it comes to music. What do you mean? Explain this left brain and then veering into the right brain. What are those two?
I never even think of it that way, but I guess.
Well, you just said it, though.
Yeah, I was saying left, not as left brain, but like.
Left of center, you said. What's left of center mean?
Unusual music.
Yeah. Perfect.
So.
Understood.
And then Reed is great because he's such a historian that he's into, Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker and all of that, and the old Beatles records. So he's both very forward thinking and has some knowledge of history. Because I never liked when it's just, it can sometimes work, but I think it's important to know what came before you.
When did you first play with John Kimmock?
With Kimmock's probably at I think we're at a wedding in Napa.
That's fantastic.
And I'm trying to think, maybe George Porter was on the gig. I remember us playing Sissy Strut one time when he was young.
In Napa.
Maybe.
Yeah, I've been up there.
I don't know if that was the gig. It could be anything, but and that's a tune I would. My rule is I never want to play that tune unless someone from the Meters is on stage because it's so often butchered,
You want to go to?
Probably
hey, listen, the Jake Feinberg show is about going to the original source. It is important in music as well.
But seeing it from that, and then as time's gone on, Johnny's got into his own thing. He's like composes great. I don't know how to explain his way of playing, but he's precise, but not totally mathed out. It's still emotional. But he does play with those ideas. He's always been fascinated by those sort of cyclical rhythms and interesting things.
Fantastic. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about two cats that I've just recently connected with. And how did you wind up meeting James Singleton and Johnny Vodakovich?
I was a big fan of, Professor Longhair, of course, and then James Booker.
That's in your blues collection, I bet.
Yeah, so James Booker's was sort of philosophically very influential to me. I can't claim to understand what he's playing half the time. He's amazing genius, But
Philosophically, in what way?
but just that sort of like, it's the connection to history and then the wildness just in general. Like it always feels in the moment. It always feels like sort of extremely, I won't say unpredictable, but exciting. Like, anyway, there was a record called Classified that I bought the first time I went to New Orleans on cassette in 1988 at a market somewhere. Like in the French market, I think. It's selling like to tourists. And I got the cassette, I loved it, and it was James and Johnny as the rhythm section. So
it was a trio record?
Uh-huh.
Booker, Bodakovich, Singleton.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I just loved it, and I listened to it all the time. And then I loved Johnny on Crawfish Fiesta by Professor Longhair. So I always loved that one. And then at some point, Stanton Moore and I were hanging out at Jazz Fest, and he sort of talked me into it wasn't his fault, but he encouraged me to move to New Orleans because I was trying to buy a house and I couldn't afford a house in Southern California.
Absolutely.
And I loved the music scene. I was like sort of high on all the music. I was so excited about being there. So I decided to move to New Orleans, and I was like, I got to call those guys and figure out how to play with them. So I actually think I talked to Johnny at High Sierra right before we moved. And I was like, if you got any gigs, can we play together? My first gig in New Orleans was with the two of them, like right after I moved there.
At what venue?
Well, first we played Baton Rouge somewhere,
Right.
And then we played the Maple Leaf.
Wow, that's and just what are being part of a rhythm section? I mean, who's the rhythm section in the Congress?
Well, I like to blur the lines between.
So you're mixing in. Are you're bringing in different? What do you mean by that?
No, so like the rhythm who is the rhythm section? It's Victor Little and Simon Law. They're both very interesting in different ways, and Simon comes from he's from Baton Rouge, I believe, and he's got that whole New Orleans tradition, but he's also young and freaky and into modern music and electronic music and avant-garde stuff, and Victor is similar, but he's played a lot of R&B gigs and blues and jazz and everything, and they both are always pushing the music outside of they'll push themselves out of the normal rhythm section roles of timekeeper or.
Can you talk about and I think Johnny and James are the same way.
They're similar. You wouldn't think they sound the same, but the philosophy's similar.
Just explain that philosophy, though, of being outside the traditional job of the rhythm maker.
So they are keeping time, but the time is much more elastic, and they might surprise you, and they might put that role on somebody else sometimes so that they can be more rhapsodic or melodic in their own way or whatever. So the lead voice passes around the band. It's not like rhythm. It's not like a Jamie Ebersol thing where you're playing along to the rhythm section. They're very polite.
I love it.
So those guys are like going to knock you back. They're going to sometimes go, "It's you got it." Sometimes you play rhythm for me, and I like those roles to be sort of, moving around the band. And sometimes sometimes in actual sections, like, oh, the drummer's going to solo now, and we'll play a vamp for him, but it'll happen in microseconds where you're just sort of passing the ball around. I've always thought about this in music, that there might be, you can listen to multiple things at the same time, that's a sound, but your ear, especially in a jazz-oriented group, your ear kind of moves around the band. And the greatest solos are not the great linear solo, it's a solo, and then you pay attention to the rhythm section, then somebody plays a chord on the piano, and then you're kind of like always moving your ear around the room. And that sounds more exciting. It sounds like a group of people rather than one guy's monologue.
Well, I was going to say, I wanted you to talk about how you learned. I mean, you have so many ideas coming out of you improvisationally, but how did you learn to not wank it on the bandstand?
Sometimes I do. but
did you was there a Hard Knocks experience for Robert Walter? Like, I mean, a lot of the old school cats, they'd get bullied off. They said, "You can't play the shuffle, boy. Get off." They'd get kicked off the bandstand. But I mean, was there everyone wants to know that people fell down.
I came from a generation that was where people were pretty kind to me. Actually, it was.
Well, you could play. I mean, there was not much they could really dispute.
I don't know about that,
But no, here's the larger.
It wasn't that cutting contest like old school, like you can't make it like. And I
you can't make it, boy.
And I sort of also didn't. I invented my own scene, so I didn't come up in like an existing. Like I went to a couple jam sessions when I was younger, but that was never my thing. I was like, we're gonna write our own songs and have our own band, and
I dig, man.
So it's a little different, but I did get humbled in a big way just by being around the older musicians and the way they played.
Give an example.
Like when Gary Bartz came to play on my album, I was like, oh, he's like this amazing guy. He's gonna rip all this fast stuff, and he played so chill. And I was like, is that gonna
cut?
Is he bringing it? Like I was all hyper, and then when we heard it back, he played better than everybody else in the band, and it's like those are all memorable lines, and he, you know what I mean? Like it taught me that you should be able to sort of sing back moments. And another thing that's just a purely like sort of piano lesson, technical thing, someone taught me to sort of sing along with the lines, and it forces you to take a breath. It forces you to think of the thing as a singable line. So, and we all like to play our fancy stuff, but I think
I like that call with the breathing and the singing. That's huge, man.
Remember, and I try not to do it loud, but on a lot of live tapes you can hear, you hear
because then it forces you to, you can't play spastically and with just so many notes. You have to actually.
It reminds you to take a breath, and I don't always remember that myself. Sometimes I get excited about it. It's a constant journey to like sort of slow down, make clear statements, think about what you're going to say before you say it. So.
Well, it was really a pleasure. The audience would love you to finish with the tune, whatever is in your heart right now, Robert Walter.
Okay, let me think of something to do. Maybe I can do that one.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all later. Thank you, Robert.
Great.